those of you that I haven't said hi to, I say hi again. I was charmed when Reed called to ask me to speak to you. The only thing that disappoints me is that I should not be standing here. Linda Tripp should be standing here. And one day she will be. But for what she has been through, she knows I'm here today. She knows what Accuracy in Media does and what they have done. I'm getting the ears back there. Can't hear me? She is enormously grateful to people like you and to organizations like this that don't abandon the whistleblower. The description that the lawyer Colapinto, am I saying it right? Colapinto gave this morning was like a textbook explanation of what a whistleblower goes through psychologically. You do wonder why some people do it. I think those of us in this room know why they do it, because there are some things in life that you witness, that you have firsthand knowledge of, and you cannot stand it anymore. You simply cannot live with the truth of something. You cannot live with yourself. You have a certain set of principles, and you will not abandon them. I see that more now than I have seen. I'm from Washington, but I'm an old hand at what people do privately and then go public with. As an agent, I guess I've been known as the mother of hard cases. I like to take a person who is getting a raw deal and turn their life around. It's almost as much fun as raising children, and sometimes far more rewarding. I love to see people get rich on their principles, and I love to see people get even with a world that has done bad things to them. I was also delighted to hear that C-SPAN was going to be here today, because I've had this not-so-secret crush on the man that runs the place. And I know if I call his name, all right, Brian Lamb, I have always thought that he was the thinking woman sex symbol. And see, the women applaud. And I buy every book that he interviews, where he could make Philadelphia Medical College's 1910 to 1984 fascinating. And I would go and buy the book. I've never had an author be interviewed with Brian Lamb, but it's one of my great dreams. And maybe now that I've said such nice things about him, he'll have a client on. I first started agenting in 75 with someone you probably know. I know Reed certainly knew him, and many of you older folks here know him, a man named Victor Lasky. Now, Victor was a very harassable guy. Victor would drive me nuts. But he came to me. He had just done a book. It just hit the bestseller list called JFK, The Man and the Myth. Well, those of us who were around in those days knew that you never said a bad word. You could not get a book published if it was anti-Kennedy. Victor did. It hit the bestseller list. It'd been on the list for 1 week when Kennedy was murdered. They backed the truck up to the bookstores and took his books away. He had a $250,000 paperback offer at the time. They canceled that offer. Victor could not get published for several years because of that book. He came to me with a book called It Didn't Start with Watergate. Again, a shot at the Kennedys. That got on the list. I fought kicking and screaming for 2 years to get that book published. It made the New York Times bestseller list. It made Victor whole. His lovely wife, Patty, worked for Reed for many years. She's now retired in Florida. So from Victor Lasky, I decided I had found a place to be in life. The client I had, to show you the follow-through on that 25 years later, the client I had just before Linda Tripp came to me was Mark Furman. Mark Furman, from being vilified, came to me in debt to his lawyers, living in the wilderness in Idaho, determined to get even. He got even, and he got big-time rich. His next two books were major bestsellers. The one he just wrote, Murder in Greenwich, they have now indicted the Michael Skakel kid that the book was about. It was about the Martha Moxley murder by Ethel Kennedy's, I guess he's a nephew. So when Linda Tripp came to me, I had plenty of experience in this kind of thing. She did not come to me with a book the second time around, no matter how many of these screaming heads you see on television that say, this is a big book deal, and that's all it was. These two women dreamt this thing up just to sell a book. Well, Lordy, the vast ignorance of how this book business works, they know what they're saying is not so. She came to me in '96 with tales of what she was seeing in the White House. I'll truncate this because I know this is probably one of the more over-informed groups. I kept her confidence for a couple of years. There was no publisher in New York that would have published an anti-Clinton book. See the pattern here? She came back to me, scared to death, last fall, and said, you probably don't want to speak to me because I let you down on the book. She couldn't go through with the other book. She got too scared with the first book. She says, you probably don't want to speak to me, but I desperately need help. And she began to tell me this tale that just fried my eyes. I couldn't believe what this woman was telling me. She did not name Monica Lewinsky. She simply said, here is what is going on, here is what I know. And I said, Linda, are you determined to make this public? Mike Isikoff had come to her already. He was hounding her. She wanted to talk to Mike Isikoff because she wanted this story in a legitimate news publication. She felt it would take heat off of her. So she said she was afraid to meet with Isikoff alone. Would I come to Washington and sit with her? So I said, Linda, I want you to think about this. I'm going to give you 24 hours. You've known this stuff for a year now on Monica and the White House Travelgate, Filegate, Vince Foster stuff for 4 or 5 years. And I said, please, put the phone down, go make yourself a drink, go to bed, think about this. Think about it for 24 hours. If you still want to do it, because you know they will destroy you, this will change your life, and you may never be happy again. But I can't talk you out of it if you want to go through with it. She called me back 24 hours later, and she said, I had thought this through. It's hard enough to pick up the phone and call you the first time. She said, I've thought this through. I haven't changed my mind. I can't change my mind. So I said, okay, what proof do you have? You have pictures? Do you have, nobody's going to believe us. No one will believe us. She said, well, Mike Isikoff believes me. So I said, all right, that's one story, and you don't know that Mike Isikoff's editors are going to let him publish this. He doesn't own the magazine. So I thought, we got to have something that is irrefutable evidence that this incredible story is true. Said the sensible thing, as far as I'm concerned, to do is take notes every time you talk to her. She said, I can't do that. This woman calls me 20 times a day. This woman calls me in hysteria, sobbing. Some phone calls, I don't even know what she's saying to me. So I said, all right, buy a tape recorder. Said, I have taped phone calls for years as a note-taking device. As a matter of fact, that very phone call that I was having with Linda was on tape. Thank God. So she said, well, it seems like such a sleazy thing to do. Now, you have to realize that Linda Tripp is a bureaucrat all her life, a military wife, a somewhat of a lapsed Roman Catholic, although I think she may have gone back with this ordeal. The idea of taping a phone conversation, I mean, even if it's a telemarketer that you want to trap who's been bothering you, was anathema to her. She did not want to do it. So I pushed her into it. Thank God again. She went off to Radio Shack. She bought this cheap tape recorder. She is a techno spaz. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't plug it in here, jack it in there. Somehow she got the thing set up. I mean, there's little instructions in the box. She got it set up, and she punched the button, and she, until a tape would run out and go flap, 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 she didn't even look at this thing. It was under the couch next to that phone. She didn't even label the tapes. Now, you can imagine the mess that the FBI had when she handed them. Literally, she had a basket beside, like you put magazines in, a basket beside the couch. And when she would finish the tape, she'd flip it in the basket. No markings, didn't know when it was done, didn't know context, nothing. Just a big basket of tapes. That's what she turned over to the OIC. And that's what the FBI lab in Quantico. Now, next year you're going to have a whistleblower up here telling us about this crummy lab in Quantico that can't get tapes straight. So when this thing hit, I picked up the phone one night around midnight, and there was this voice on the other end saying, "This is Matt Drudge in Hollywood." I thought, oh my God, what does this guy want with me? Because we'd been working on this now for maybe 6 months. Isikoff was ready to go with the story. We were just bracing ourselves because we didn't know where this was going to go, but we knew it would be explosive. And Matt Drudge says to me, "I have information that Mike Isikoff is writing." Well, he just spilled it all out. He had the story. I'm not going to deny it. I'm not going to lie to the man. He had all the details. To this day, I don't know who his source was. And at this point, I don't care. At the time, I was livid. But I knew the cat was out of the bag. This is an internet gossip. I told him it was just... Subsequently, we've become very good friends. He is a truly unique creature. If any of you in here have met Matt Drudge, there's nobody quite like this kid. He told me that after I confirmed it, he hit the enter button on his keyboard and he realized that he was crying because he knew his life would never be the same. I certainly knew I could feel the techno plates under me moving. I knew the media world would never be the same. I knew I was on the back of a tiger, and I don't know, I'm still riding it, clearly. When Linda, the week before, went to Judge Starr, she was told, "Do not speak to Lucianne Goldberg." I was a rogue element. I was up in New York, a New York literary agent. My God, they didn't say literary agent. They said press agent. I mean, how far down can you get? So here I was, stuck with this story about to blow up the world, and I couldn't talk to Linda Tripp. I couldn't check with her. So what I was hanging out there with, when the media blocked off my street, I live on the west side of New York, and those micro thingy trucks had totally blocked the street. The Scorps were out there. The phones started ringing. I put out a call to my 2 incandescent sons. There's no one else I could trust. It had to stay in the Goldberg family. Jonah, who is here today. Where are you, Jonah? Hi, Jonah. How was your sandwich, honey? Good. And free. Jonah flew home. He was working here at AEI with Ben Wattenberg and with New River Media. He flew home. My son Josh, who lives around the corner, walked around the corner. And we lived in this firestorm for about 2 weeks. When it was really bad, I couldn't leave the apartment. One of the kind of high points of that week was, well, the first person that called, they were all in Cuba. Remember, all the big feet were down in Cuba covering the Pope. And they couldn't hustle back fast enough. I mean, here history was being made with the Pope and Cuba and communism versus Catholicism, and they're jumping on the plane because of Monica Lewinsky. The first call I got was from Ted Koppel. He said, "I'm calling you from the airport." Now, I've never spoken to Ted Koppel in my life. I don't know these people. I mean, I know them like you know them. You see them on television. he said, what is this? What's going on here, Mrs. Goldberg? And I said, well, what it is what it is. And I, was rather curt with my language. And he said, I don't believe it. Now, what has driven me through this whole thing are Ted Koppel's not believing this. Because when you know in your heart, and this is what the whistleblowers have in common, you know in your heart something is true. I mean, Dennis Scalambrini knew he had that Hillary answer on paper. He knew he had heard it with his own ears. I knew what Linda knew. I knew it with dead certainty and dozens of phone calls, and I had heard 2 of the tapes. I knew it. I said, okay, a month from now, they're all going to come around, and I'm going to have the last laugh. 7.5 months later, they finally admitted that what Linda Tripp was saying and what I was saying as her, sort of spokesman in the free world, was true. But I had to go through a process to feed the story. Now, some New York columnist wrote a column that was kind of cute saying, there's very little that was complimentary written about either one of us. But he said, Goldberg has kept this story alive by flipping information to the press seals like fresh fish. And I thought, no, wrong metaphor. This was feeding little bits of bloody red meat to this monster that was just outside my door, breathing very heavily and getting, feed me, like the plant creature in Little Shop of Horrors. And I found that they will eat anything. You can give them the most outrageous thing, and they'll snap it up and say, more, feed me. So, until April, mind you, this happened on January 17th, I would talk to the print media, but I would not go on television because I knew that was sheer suicide. The Carville heads were out there beating this thing to death, and I was not going to subject myself to that. I simply wouldn't do it. So we got through until April, and as a geek act, I think more than anything else, Jonah and I were invited to the White House Correspondents' Dinner. We were guests of my beloved New York Post, just a little island of sanity in the middle of all this black tie craziness. It was a absolutely fabulous evening. If you remember, it was one that Paula Jones showed up at. And we went to the sort of semi-crashed the Vanity Fair party afterward. And walking back to the hotel that night, 4 o'clock in the morning, very overserved. I was walking with Jonah, with John Podhoretz, with Matt Drudge. You can see how, the vast right-wing conspiracy huddles together for protection, particularly when we're drunk at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I realized there was a stranger among us, sort of like a pilot fish, following along with his hands jammed in his pocket. And I turned around. I probably shouldn't name these people's names, but what the hell. It was Walter Isaacson from Time Magazine, editor-in-chief of Time Magazine. Now, we had already targeted him as one of them. We'd already sorted out the good guys from the bad, and believe me, except for people like Bill Salmon on the Washington Times, you can show you the papers I remember, and a few good-hearted souls in New York. Of course, the Post was totally behind us. The New York Post, the Good Post, as Ronnie Reagan used to call it. They loved us because we were feeding them all our information. I realized that this pilot fish was listening to every word we were saying. So, emboldened by wine, I decided to pounce on him. And I said, Walter, how come you've got this big tube that runs right into the west wing of the White House? Everything you print comes right out of Sid Blumenthal's fertile little mind. And he said, also overserved, he said, well, we can't get anything from your side, so we have to take their side. I thought, ooh, you rat. But that did it. When I got home that Sunday night, I thought, okay, I've been feeding little bits of red meat to the print media. I think I'll go on television with a whole basket of red meat. So the first thing I did was call Jackie Judd, and she double sourced this story, and I thought, if they if the thing is slowing down and they're not paying attention, why don't I throw them the Gap dress? That will get their attention. Well, it sure did. We were called, Lanny Davis called Jonah a liar or something on TV over there, said there was no such thing as a dress. But you know, when you know something is true, you're sitting there on your couch and you're watching this and you're going, just wait. Just wait. It is all going to come out in the end. So we struggled through the summer. I still didn't have, through the first part of the summer, I still had no contact with Linda. I didn't know whether she approved of what I was doing. I mean, I had to leak bits of it. Well, it's not really leaking. It's putting it in a big bucket and pouring it over their heads. I had to give information that Linda had given me, not so much in confidence, but, well, it wasn't in confidence because there's still some things I haven't said that she told me. But those things that directly related to what was on the tape, and those things that I had heard from the 2 tapes that the Office of Independent Counsel let me copy and keep. I still didn't know from her lawyers whether what I was doing was okay, but I thought, I can't stop. I have to keep this up because someday she's going to come out. The night that she went to the grand jury, I got a call from a mutual friend who said, Linda would love to talk to you. And I thought, well, what kind of a friend are you? If somebody's going up to the grand jury, you can't call them up. So I called her. We talked for 2 hours. I learned what unmitigated hell she had been living through she had to move out of her house for a month. Now, I don't know about you guys, but for a woman, that, you know, your own house, your own bed, your own sheets, your own life, she had to move out. She was in protective custody. A lot of other awful, one night vandals came and threw toilet paper all over hedges and on her lawn and got those traffic cones and made them into witches' hat. And that's just the little stuff. Then you turn on Jay Leno, and then you turn on Geraldo. She didn't deserve this. She did not deserve this. She was not lying. She was fed up at what she knew. But most of all, she was scared stiff because the president's girlfriend had threatened her. The president's girlfriend had handed her talking points, for instance, in the car and said, here, he wants you to have these. Well, you know who he was. Now, this stuff was relentless. This was unmitigated pressure for her to lie when she got to the Paula Jones deposition. Another little thing I'd like to correct, they've jerked her around for the fact that Paula Jones lawyer was at her house the Friday night before Clinton gave his deposition. He was there to take a deposition from Linda in lieu of her going in to the big depositions and having to face Bob Bennett, who had called her a liar on national television. That's why the Paula Jones lawyer was there. He was there for 20 minutes. Linda's lawyer was with her for that. I can attest to that, as Linda can. Linda will, as I say, hopefully be standing here next year, maybe even sooner. She has the Maryland business to get over with, and we do too. Joan and I have been subpoenaed to go to beautiful downtown Ellicott City, Maryland next month, and tell whatever we know, which is almost less than what I've told you here. A word about my wonderful son here. I did the only thing a mother can do when she's trapped and under a firestorm is that you throw your children to the wolves. I mean, what are they for? And any of you who are worried about, should I send them to this camp? Should I send them to private school? Should I send them to Italy for the summer? Should I buy the $150 sneakers? Do it. Because if you ever get in a terrible jam, they come home and they take care of you. But Jonah did, and Josh did as well. Josh has a kind of a job where it's odd hours, so he couldn't have as much time. When I couldn't stand the television, and I did the Today Show, Larry King, and Chris Matthews, and I'll keep doing them. But I thought, I can't stand this. I can't stand the loss of anonymity. Let's throw Jonah on television. And he, as any of you who have seen him know, he's been absolutely terrific. He's an absolute pro at it. And one of the wonderful highlights, sort of a Ted Koppel moment, was only recently. Jonah's about the only one that has come out of this with a really good job. He's gone to work for National Review and now writes a terrific, it's on their webpage, an online column called Cleverly, the Goldberg File. And about a week ago, it's still in the archives. You'll have to go look at it. He wrote a scathing column about Greta Van Susteren. Something his mother did not urge him to do, but I was not displeased. And last week I got a call. It's Greta Van Susteren. And she says, Lucianne, why doesn't your son like me? And I said, well, I had promised at the beginning of this thing I was never going to lie to the press. So I said, well, probably, Greta, because you're dishonest, you're dissembling, sometimes you're just bone dumb about the law. And she said, oh, well, and while she's gathering herself together, I said, Greta, why are you so taken aback? Doesn't anybody else in the media not like you? She said, no. And I said, well, when they write something bad about you, are you going to call their mother? So I said, call Jonah. He's 29 years old. You got to fight with Jonah. Call him. Did she ever call you, Jonah? No, scared. See, she's scared of you. Jonah was also the one that brought this phone message to me. Now, nobody can claim this phone message. Mom, it's Tom Brokaw on line 1, and he wants to talk to you about oral sex. No, I thought, I can die now. I can die now. Die now. Die now. And Jonah wrote that in the New Yorker, and I think Tom Brokaw was a little embarrassed by it. But don't say anything to a Goldberg. Don't expect them to say out in public, loud and clear. As far as the media goes, with how accurate they were, I would say some of them got it pretty good. Some of them got it wrong because they're lazy, and some of them, like Jane Mayer at the New Yorker, got it deliberately wrong, as Mr. Clayman has chapter and verse on. What she did to Linda Tripp was unthinkable, with printing Linda's little teenage arrest, denying it, and so forth. But if I haven't already just taken care of Jane Mayer, I'll try it again the next time. I think the reason that a lot of people said, why did this scandal catch on when they're far more serious scandals? I agree. I think all those other scandals are truly, truly egregious and have to be dealt with. But why did suddenly the media, who had not paid any attention to Clinton scandals for 6 years, jump on this one with a frenzy? I get to this day between 30 and 40 phone calls a day. They're all Monica calls. They're all Linda Tripp calls. The tiniest bit of red raw meat, as I said, they jump on. I think this scandal took and grew because basically it was a chick thing. Everybody can relate to it. The women really got it. A lot of the men were a little sheepish about it because there, by the grace of God, go I, huh, fellas? But we wives and mothers really put this one together real fast and never stopped talking about it. It was dishy. It was funny. I mean, come on. I don't think you could have taken this totally seriously until you really thought about what this man was doing with this kid. That's dead serious. But some of it was hilarious. And how many dinner parties have we gotten through with nothing but Monica talk? By the way, has anybody heard any good jokes lately? I'm not collecting them. People stop me on the street now and tell me Clinton jokes. I have heard them all. However, if there was a vast right-wing conspiracy, there wasn't when Hillary said it, but I think there is now. I think our numbers are growing, and I don't think it's a matter of left and right. I think it's a matter of right and wrong. Next week there is a march here. I'm going to shamelessly plug this, and Joyce Press, one of our organizers, is here. It's a march at we got too big for Lafayette, right? You think we're going to be at the monument. It'll be on the internet. This is the first march that has ever been organized in 2 weeks, I think this has been accomplished, on the internet. It has never happened before. We're all amateurs I'm just a speaker there. I mean, I'm not the organizer of it. It's being organized by a website called freerepublic.com. I'm sure some of you are addicts of Free Republic as I am, or FREEP as we call it. It's www.freerepublic.com. And go there. You can get there from Drudge. A lot of people use Drudge as their homepage. Drudge links right to Free Republic. And it's all the stuff you don't get to read in the mainstream media, plus the mainstream media. But these are people who form the core of those of us who are fed up, those of us who have the Linda Tripp disease. We are fed up. It's not political anymore. And they put this march together out of just sheer zeal. The leader of it, a man named Jim Robinson, is in a wheelchair. He has degenerative muscular dystrophy. This was the latest in the year he could come to Washington. He has degenerative muscular dystrophy. This was the latest in the year he could come to Washington. He simply wanted to come in his wheelchair, hold a sign, and sit in front of the White House. When people on the website found out he was coming to Washington, they said, "You're not going alone." In the last 10 days, I've heard there's a caravan coming from the greater Boston area. Can you imagine people from Boston? There's a group coming in Philadelphia. There's a group coming from California, from Arizona. There is a group of 40 people coming from Little Rock, Arkansas. Hallelujah. So we don't know. We may get 1,500, 2,000. We may get 10. We don't. That's not the point. It's not how many come. It's the idea of what brings us. Alan Keyes will be speaking. I will be speaking. And an interesting speaker, L.D. Brown. Do any of you remember L.D. Brown? He has never spoken before. He is joining us. Congressman Bob Barr will be joining us. So it should be good music, good speaking, and a very, very good spirit. These are just Americans. They're not Republicans. They're not Democrats. They are Americans who are tired of it already. Just tired of it. But back to the job I have to keep doing until Linda can come out and talk about it herself. Please don't desert her. Please stick with her. I know you will. Stick with her until she can get her legal problems straightened out and can tell the world what this was like for her. It's never the same if a representative talks about it as when she does. She is an extremely strong woman. All these whistleblowers are strong people. And we can't desert them. We must defend them. We must do what Larry Klayman has done for these people. This country's in serious, serious trouble if we can't make a safe haven for people who can't stand corruption anymore. And that was Linda Tripp's fate, and now it's mine. And at least it has given me the opportunity to even some scores, because now I have access to the media. And there's some scores that need to be settled. You will hear from me later, and you know who you are. But thank you for listening for me. Thank you for inviting me. I've never been to an AIM conference before, and it's fascinating. Thanks. Now, they may have a question. If we have time for questions, I'll do. What's our timing?
Well, we'll take a few. Yeah, we have a little time.
Take a few questions.
Yeah,
they have to, as I said in that first press conference I ever gave on the street, but this doesn't have to apply now. I said, if you ask me a question, it better have Linda Tripp in it, or I won't answer the question. Yes.
Stand up. It said that neither Monica nor her mother, who's the wife of a former chairman of the Democratic Party in New York and has some sort of family connection, neither of them have come clean. Do you have anything to add to what they haven't come clean with?
Well, I can't tell you what the specifics is of what they can't. I could just give you a blanket statement. Monica Lewinsky lied to the grand jury, and so did her mother. It's that flat and clear. Linda sat down with that Monica's testimony with a highlighter. I just went through and marked the lies, and it practically covers the page. She lied to the grand jury. Okay?
Let me.
Oh, Jonah. Well, you stand up, Jonah, and say hi. Did you do that before? This is the red meat.
You have a question, Jonah?
What's Sam and Harry's?
Let me throw in a question here. I've been very curious, as you know. We've been very much interested in the Vince Foster case. And in her grand jury testimony, Linda mentions her fears, which were partly generated, her fears for her safety, partly generated by the White House reaction to Vince Foster's death, the death of Jerry Parks.
Jerry Parks, yeah.
Well, both. She said the
right.
reaction was reminiscent, one of the other.
Right.
Did she ever tell you anything about 1/3 of her statement to the FBI has been redacted? Her
right.
interview on the Foster death.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been curious. What has she told the FBI that they don't want us to know? Did she ever tell you anything about the Foster?
Yes, she did. Next question. I can't do that. It's almost like lawyer-client privilege. It'll all come out. Yes.
My name's Reed Collins. I used to work in this
Oh, yeah,
town.
sure. Hi, I remember you.
Yeah. Tell me something. Do you know or do you surmise that had the Washington Post not broken the Lewinsky story when it did, might the FBI successfully have wired Monica Lewinsky and sent her out to Vernon Jordan and or the boss?
That's a good question. I don't think so, because what you have to know about Monica, and the reason I said that she lied, she had always been willing to, when it really came to crunch time with Judge Starr, to give up Clinton on the sex stuff. She wanted to. That validated her. You know, a former little fat girl from Beverly Hills High gets the president. And, I mean, we've all been there and had those fantasies. You know, when you're at your worst, you think you can do your best. But she was not going to give him up on the stuff that would get him into deep trouble. And she didn't. If you read that testimony, you'll see. She answered the sex questions ad nauseum. But she did not, no one ever told me to lie. Well, come on. No one ever says lie. It's not the way the world works. But I don't think she would have done something that, to answer your question directly, Reed, I don't think she would have done something that would have hurt him. To go so far as to wire herself. I wish she had. Wouldn't that be fun? I would have loved to have heard that tape. But no, I don't think she would have. You say the Washington Post broke the story. That's a big fight too as to who actually did it. But I say Drudge did it, and keep it up, Drudge. else?
Okay?
Yeah,
Got
I got one more.
Last question.
Can you tell us anything why Starr is investigating Linda about duplicated tapes or anything like that?
I am glad you asked me that question. I spent 3 hours at the OIC yesterday afternoon telling them how rotten they were being to Linda, hanging her out to dry with this thing. And they just sit there and smile, smile. Isn't she cute? Come in here and bawl us out. What happened there is she had 2 lawyers in this, and whose names I won't mention, Kirby Bear and Jim Moody. Those were the only 2 people who had possession of these tapes. There are 9 tapes that show overcopying. And, I mean, I said, look, why don't you just do the logical thing? I realize it is not scientific, but go talk to the 2 lawyers. Ask them if they copy, or had somebody else copy the tapes. Linda didn't. Linda Tripp does not lie, and she certainly doesn't lie under oath in court, and she didn't. So she did not. She barely could make the tape recordings, let alone copy them. Okay?
Okay, before we say goodbye to thank you, I want to present you with a little plaque here. This is, you are acting for our whistleblower, Linda Tripp. This is an award, Accuracy in Media honors Linda Tripp for having the courage and integrity to expose government wrongdoing and stand up for the truth.
Oh, wow.
Please give it to her without us.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much.
Let me remind you all, this is a magnificent talk. You can get it on